Okay, we are live now. So we're just gonna wait a minute and then we're gonna start with introductions and what we're up to this week. Give it one more minute just for the buffer. Awkward silence, but I think I don't like that, so we'll just start. Hey guys, this is Naruto and Rishi. We're back with the Hot Takes podcast with a new debate, which is basically interop acceleration. We have Osman from Polygon today. We have Vaibhav, founder and CEO of Socket. We have Prabal from Avail. And like everyone here is definitely pushing a lot in the interop space, and we wanted to like check in with everyone, what's going on, what are the hot takes, what are you guys been working on. So yeah, for the starters, can you guys introduce yourself? Osman, you want to go first?
Totally. Thank you for initiating this one. This is Oz from Polygon. Pleasure to be here with some of the Polygon OGs, VC, Prabal. What we're building at Polygon really wouldn't have been possible with their early contributions. Um, I am personally a core member of the growth team, early member of the business team. My current goal is to grow the adoption of Polygon's custom blockchain and interop solutions. Previously, I was in financial services. This is 5 years ago. I'm actually currently loving that this time around. We're really disrupting how money and assets are moving across the globe. Our technology, general blockchain, and Polygon specifically is totally rewiring commerce, financial services, driving efficiencies, lowering costs, opening new revenue streams. Let's just not please hand in all the keys. But yeah, that's who I am.
Nice to meet you, Osman. Vaibhav, you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to go next. Hey guys, I'm Vaibhav. I also go by VC. I was one of the first, I think, people in the Matic team, which later rebranded to Polygon. So I ended up building a big chunk of like Polygon POS, which I don't know how it still works, but I'm glad it does. It was a lot of fun. I ended up building one of the first ZK rollups back in 2019, and that's when I sort of decided that hey, I think Polygon POS is doing great, and we gotta get more developers on it, and I need to go figure out how rollups will work. So I was at Ethereum Foundation helping Arbitrum, Optimism, and a bunch of other rollup teams take off. While doing that stuff, it became clear to me that hey, we'll have a shit ton of rollups and chains in general to expand the space, and we need like one socket to plug into, right? So we need like this one universal socket that users and developers will plug into and get access to the on-chain world, no matter what chain this is. So that's what Socket does. And I'm one of the founders, I lead tech product, engineering research, all of those things. And yeah, I think we've all internally been following Polygon and all the interop work Polygon is doing with Aglair, Prabal, Anurag. We've been chatting behind the scenes, talking about Avail Nexus and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to see both the teams sort of like push interop in the right direction.
I really thought when Wabo said that my name is Wabo and I go by VC, I thought he'll mention Pop-Up Girls, but no problem with that. Yeah, Prabal sir, you want to go next?
Yeah, hey, I'm Prabal. I'm one of the co-founders of Avail. Of course, came from the same Polygon background. I joined, I think, just after you left, or maybe we had some overlap. Vaibhav, I don't remember quite. But yeah, I mean, Vaibhav had, been contributing to an amazing part of the code base, which ran when I joined, and we tried to, make sense out of it. So that was my main role, to kind of try to improve that. And again, from early on, then, as Vaibhav was mentioning, right, that we were super, blue pilled about the roll up centric vision. We knew that roll ups are going to completely proliferate the market. We are going to see a ton of these new chains coming up, and we were thinking like, what are going to be the key bottlenecks of that space. And we knew that it is going to be data availability, because it is such a fundamental resource that rollups need. But soon after, it will be fragmented if there is no cohesive experience that is there that rollups can offer to the users. Otherwise, it will be a mess for the users just looking at one chain or the other, because even within Polygon POS and Ethereum, we were seeing users struggling to get a hang of which chain they are on, where are my assets lying, what bridge do I use, where do my funds come from, how much time do I need to bridge and bridge out and bridge in, where are the staking contracts, where are the bridged assets, and so on and so forth. So it was quite a pain for the users, and we could see that. And it's the same right now, but the magnitude is so much bigger. We are seeing 50, 100 different chains, and users are struggling to cope up. And that's where we think that UX should take precedence. The amount of friction, if we can minimize that as much as possible for the users, we can all grow together. So that's the vision from which we are building Avail Nexus.
I think that's very interesting. Like the whole Interop. When I was using Polygon ZKVM, I had some funds there, and then it was confusing on why there's that. I have some weird token there, and then why not on the POS chains? Understandable. We're gonna have some spicy questions as well later, but like I want to start it slow, just to warm up everyone in the audience and you guys. I just want to know, according to you guys, what is Interop in your words? Back in 2021, there was like this thing when NFTs were on rise that, oh, you have your NFT game with like a gun in on one chain or one verse, one multiverse, and then you're putting it another. That was like such a marketing thing. But now it has changed to a lot to like tokens moving freelessly, that kind of situation. So what, according to you guys, all three of you, Interop is? You want to go first, Ross?
Sure. I think like I'm gonna be practical here and not gonna go from a philosophical perspective. VC and Prabal are probably much deeper thinkers. I think like for me, just the definition is in a world where there are thousands of chains, from like global banks to experimental rollups, everything breaks without a neutral coordination layer. And I think that's where like Interop and Interop as a service comes into play. I think the ideal like interoperability solution connects all of Web3, so users can move assets freely whenever they want, wherever they want, and developers don't have to rebuild bridges and interoperability solutions every time. So I think my summary is like there should just be like one solution that essentially allows builders and users to move assets freely across the Web3 space.
What do you say, VC?
I think Interop at its like very core is about like having these chains sort of like understand each other and sort of understand what's like happening, and sort of having this like shared language between them. So if like Prabal was a chain and Oz was a chain, how can Prabal text Oz that something happened in his life, right? So I think at a fundamental level, we need that connectivity tissue to sort of like build on top of them. So for me, it's a very simple concept, a shared language between chains. So we can all like collaborate and communicate, and applications and users can have a better time interacting between them.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Prabal, sir, you were saying something.
No, I was just saying like maybe us try to say go the non-philosophical take, and he went full linguistic here with the language analogy. I think for me, it's the same what Vaibhav said, but mainly how can two chains talk to each other securely, right? I mean, I know that Interop doesn't always talk about security practices all the time, but there's a pressing need for secure Interop rather than just a way to get things done. Of course, from a user perspective, they don't care, right? So as long as things get done, um, they don't care. But it's about like worst case scenario. It's about the pessimistic case when which we need to analyze for, and that's where interop is a much nuanced field. So it interop means different things to different people. For protocols, it's about the guarantees that they get from the interop mechanism about the other chain, which they have no control on, right? So, as to just extend Vaibhav's analogy, if I was a chain and Os was a chain, and Vaibhav is the language in the middle, he is the socket, so to say. Uh, and Auth claims to have XYZ funds. Why do I believe him? Right? How can I believe him? Because I do not have any notion of what the guarantees that Auth is giving to me. So I need to get enough security guarantees that Auth is not lying, or Vaibhav is not playing his information asymmetry here. So
I
that's
totally
what
am.
yeah. So then like for protocols, interop is a different game. For developers, it's a different notion. For users, of course, they hate interop, right? It's like if there was a single chain with all the good properties that they want, they would just love to be on that chain, but practically it's not possible.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, this one for VC. I've been a user of Bungie, and love what you guys are doing with Socket. But would love to know from you, like, how do you guys see the interop space, and how does specifically Socket is solving this interop for Ethereum or altogether?
So I'll start with the hot take, right? That's
For
what it
sure.
says on the banner here. So I think like Socket is not solving interop. It's at the best leveraging interop. And for me, after I built Polygon POS, I built all of these like infrastructure systems. It became clear to me that I want to build something at a higher level, something like closer to the applications and users and developers. So that's where Socket sits. So Sockets, it's not exactly building interop. It's not trying to connect networks. It's trying to abstract them by leveraging Avail Nexus, by leveraging Aglair, right? That's why when you use our products, for example, Bungee is not a bridge, right? It's a user and a developer tool in some sense, where you get to utilize the best out there, be it a bridge, be it a DEX, while fulfilling the thing that you want to do. That's what we focus at Socket and Bungee, is like sort of like sit between the low level infra, the interop infra, the chains, and sort of like between the user and developer and the low level infra, and sort of make this entire thing usable, right? Does that answer the question, or did I miss a part of it?
It does. You want to add something else?
No, I'm
So,
good. Yeah, go.
so I have a question then, and then this also expands to like both Oz and Trouble. When you guys say that Socket is leveraging, it's let's just say it's a tool, it's a platform, to leverage either Nexus, Avail Nexus, which is an interop solution, and then Aglair. How does the how it works in the back end, how does the user workflow work? I would say like then Bungee turns out to be a front end where user doesn't need to know anything what you guys are using, Nexus, Agler, or anything else, and then it just does that. And then the front end user is just looking at that. So that's one question to you, VC, and then like I would want Prabal and Oz to like expand a little bit on like how the workflow works, or like the user flow works for both of the products as well.
Yeah, that's a solid question. So Socket speaks to developers, and Bungee speaks to users, right? Bungee is a sort of like a user-facing product, and Socket is a developer-facing product. Talking from a Socket perspective, I think our goal as like something that sits between infrastructure and the users and developers of the space is to sort of like communicate the right elements of the infrastructure. And security is one of those right elements, for example. So we sort of like expose the trade-offs that are possible to the end developer and the user, so they can choose what's important for their application. For example, security is super important, right? But maybe there is a set of users out there that are sending like $1 transactions that might not care about it. For us, for like a developer or a user on Socket, they'll be able to select it at runtime or while they are like building the application that they want to use AgLayer or they want to use like some inferior, less secure system for this specific use case, right? Because maybe they're trying to optimize latency or cost. We are totally unopinionated on that front. Similarly, when you use our products, our user-facing products like Bungee, for example. So Bungee as a product offers chain abstracted swaps. What that means is you can just do like bonk on Solana, swap to like Aave on Polygon. You won't even know that, or like you don't have to know that it's on Polygon or on Solana. All you care about that is that I'm like swapping my bonk to Aave, right? As a user, that's what you care about. But this is the action, but you also care about like the other like sort of like metadata that's attached to this action. How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? What's the probability that I lose my fund in the process? So as the sort of like layer that sits between the user and the infrastructure in this case, Bungee gives you the ability to like prioritize between like these three options. So I think like Socket and Bungee, we again sort of sit between users and the infra and sort of act as this like translation abstraction layer, exposing the right parameters for you to like play with. Does that make sense? And maybe you guys want to extend one of this.
Oz, go for it. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think VC's point is basically summarizing kind of like what I was gonna say too. I don't want to repeat it too much, but like Socket is a level higher than AgLayer. AgLayer is more a core settlement layer, if you will. You can do transactions across AgLayer as well. But the core functionality or the core value proposition of AgLayer is, I think, the use of ZK proofs, which is a more infrastructure level value proposition than what Socket and Bungee does. But just for the sake of like being a little bit informative here as well, when a transaction happens from one chain to chain A to chain B that is both connected to the AG layer, let's say Alice is sending USDC on chain A. Chain A records that in a Merkle route that tracks cross-chain transactions. AgLayer waits for that block that chain A submits to be finalized, and then AgLayer contract updates this thing called global exit route, and global exit route is kind of like a shared snapshot across all chains. Then chain B sees this route, verifies that with a ZK and Merkle proof, and confirms the transfer. When that happens, the user on chain B or it could be Alice's chain B account as well, receives the token. So I think like the key thing here is that AgLayer allows for L1 finality with the use of ZK. So in that sense, Socket can use AgLayer as one of the routes to route the user's transactions. As VC said, if you care about the value of your transaction, you use AgLayer and not anything else. That was a joke.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I will just add a bit here, right? That this is precisely the conundrums that people face. Like it's about latency versus security that are sometimes at odd, right? So if I have to classify the types of interops, right? The one is the message passing type. So in the message passing type, you can, as was mentioning, right, there is a Merkle proof, there is a root, you propagate that root, along with that a proof of finality and or proof of execution, depending on what kind of chain that is, and so on. And then based on that message that has been passed and the verification of message, you do the corresponding action. So that is a one class of interrupt which has been very popular, and rightly so, because when you are doing it across L1s, this is almost the only type of interrupt that you can verifiably do, because they are all validator based and you need to verify validator signatures and stuff. The second class of interrupt that we have seen is liquidity based, right? So we have seen that there is one person or a company or a group of people who are especially fronting you the money, right? So what they are doing is they are receiving on one account on chain A, and then they are convinced and it's their money, and then they're fronting you the money on the other chain. So this is liquidity based. It's very popular. It's very fast. You don't need to wait for L1 finality XYZ. The liquidity provider determines what is the finality that they want. There has been kind of limitations on that, because how much liquidity you can give it upfront and so on and so forth. So that is a more liquidity based, which is of course very popular, very fast, and for low amounts of funds that Vaibhav was mentioning, it is very easy for us to do that. But then there are third class, which is coming up and increasingly becoming popular, which is more about intents and solvers, and basically democratizing the liquidity fronting market and making things much more tracked through on-chain contracts and off-chain agents. So you put some guarantees on-chain. That is, you essentially delegate the risk from the users to some of these solvers. The solvers are not only fronting you the money, but they are also fronting some of the risk. And that is coming out to be some of the middle ground, right? Middle ground, because you can still wait for the ZK proofs that Os was mentioning, but you can wait for the ZK proofs at the solver level and not at the user level. So the solvers still want the best of the guarantees, because, as Os said, Agler is the best. So they just want to wait for Agler. While a user of Bungee, they just don't care, and they want this to be fronted to them and solved at the best rate that is available through the Bungee front end, right? So that is coming out to be the common ground. And across these different sectors and somewhere in the middle as well, we have seen huge amounts of progress happening over the years. There are clearly leaders in the space. We are not the first ones to talk about Interop. Interop has been a problem since a very long time. I mean, Vaibhav here has been working on this for a very, very long time, right? So that is there, but still, I think, as I'm trying to mention, Interop is different things to different people, and for each one of these class of users, there are different trade-offs that they can take, and that is what I think more and more people are opting for, including what we are looking at, in Nexus. Like, we tried we know that ZK is the end game, and ZK guarantees are going to be the cornerstone of the most secure way of interop, but we cannot afford the latency, and hence we are looking for a more T based approach, more of the intent based approach, so as to give as fast of a guarantee as possible to the solvers, whereas the solvers make it extremely low latency, because, as Os mentioned, you have to wait for finality, and who is going to wait for deterministic finality of optimistic chains, for example, right? Because optimistic chains can take 7 days worth of so-called theoretical finality time, which no one has time for. Even solvers would break at that kind of cadence.
Sorry, I started making notes, but yeah. Coming back to the classification that you were saying, Prabal, and you said that there would be more approaches for Nexus. There would be a ZK1, there would be T, and you said that the first iteration would have intents. But I would want you to explain more on that. Like, how does Nexus come into all of this, and like maybe some sort of differentiator, considering that we already have a lot of interop players who leverage that.
So I think Nexus for us is a class of protocols. Like we do not believe on one size fits all. Like we have spent more than a year on zk based interop, and we have seen that it is not feasible for us. I'm not saying for anyone else. For us, it is not feasible in terms of user experience, and I will try to give you the reason. The reason is that it's a cost versus time trade-off, purely a cost versus time trade-off. There is nothing today that a zk cannot do. Almost everything that we are talking about, the scale of computation that we are talking about, zk can do it, right? The technology is fast enough, is stable enough, is mature enough to take care of it. It's only a matter of cost. If I'm talking about 10 user ops per second in the interrupt space, and for 10 user ops, I'm having to verify or validate a 30 million block size gas limit block, right, on any typical EVM chain. The amount of cost per user op for a 2-second block time is just too big, right? Because you have to throw in a lot of GPUs and a compute for it to actually validate all the ZK proofs. So what you will do is, of course, you will not do it. You will amortize it. You will try to, bundle them together, and you will try to make things, once every few minutes or few hours. And that is exactly what we have seen in the ZK rollup space also. ZK rollups is not that, a ZK rollup cannot produce proofs for every block. They just choose not to because it's too costly, right? So that is essentially why we are looking at a class of protocols, because as Vaibhav mentioned, different users want different guarantees. For a low value, it is okay for them to take the most shittiest way out because they don't care. They just want $1 for $1. Whereas if I'm, doing $1 million worth of transfer, I would might want to just use ZK proofs, the most secure, and Osman has already told us that Agler is the best. So we want to use then Agler for $1 million transfer, right? Nothing else. So again, in Avail also we are trying to leverage a class of protocols, a bunch of protocols, all of which are at the user's choice what they want to use, because each one of them will have different trade-offs in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of latency. And it's on the user to choose what is best for them, not me or anyone on this show right now.
Okay, I think that was too technical for a lot of people. I'm kidding, but very nice explanation, I think. And you're right on the part where we need, or we're looking at multiple protocols, and how it's a time thing for ZK stuff. So one question that I have for you guys and all three of you, and this is a little bit spicy, is everyone is building interop solutions, right? So how do users choose, or how do chains or rollups or dApps choose one of your solution? Because doesn't it become like a UX issue for the users themselves? um, isn't it like similar to like choosing between multiple bridges or multiple different swaps? What do you guys think? Because everyone is building interop solution now. We have three, or at least let's say three of these here, and then there are some other on that are not here on CT. Different projects working on interop solutions. How do people choose when there's so many choices?
I mean, that's what we do for a living now. I think that's our entire job, right? I think that's why we sort of build at a layer that we build, because I think all of these solutions need to exist independently. All of them have use cases. All of them make a certain trade-off for a certain set of like users, and sort of things like Socket and Bungee will exist to sort of like unify all of these things into like simple abstractions that developers and users feel comfortable to use. And I think there will be other projects like us in the space that operate at like similar levels. And I think building an abstraction is almost like building art. Like you never know what's the right level of it. It's super subjective. But I think yeah, that's what we do for a living. And I think it's super important that Aglet exists. It's super important that Avail Nexus exists. It's super important that this entire trade-off spectrum sort of like gets explored. We have that super centralized, super insecure but fast solution. We have that super secure but super expensive solution, so that we can like bundle it all together and users and developers can optimize at dev time or at runtime.
Or so you want to say
I
something?
will,
Uh,
No,
Prabal, go.
go for it, Praval.
no, I was just saying like exactly what Vaibhav mentioned, and one of the hot takes is that if there are 100 interrupt solutions, maybe five will survive, right? And that is okay. Like I'm not here to say which five or who is that. Maybe I will try to bet on myself there, but it is
Maybe.
extremely important, maybe. But it is extremely important that the entire space gets explored, because it is not always that the best tech wins. It's not always that the best distribution today wins. It is a convoluted game, right? Where you cannot bet on who wins just by what you are seeing on the book. It's an adoption game. It's an incentivization game. It's a, today newer TradFi comes coming, so it might be a regulation game as well. You do not know. Like a super centralized might not make the cut for a federated player that is wants it, and they might set the tone for all the others, right? You never know what kind of watchtowers come into the space. They almost dictate it, right? Today, I mean, you can run a roll up just like anything, right? I mean, you can have all the different hundreds of security configurations, but L2 bit tries to be there and forces people to come up with some sort of guarantees, right? I mean, maybe they are doing a good job, maybe doing a bad job. It doesn't matter, but there are players like these who will come up as things get more and more lucrative for people to join in, and that is why it is extremely important for all of us to try to explore that space, because there's a huge amount of technical and non-technical things that we need to explore. And unless we explore it, we won't know that which ones have what problems.
So you're saying the more you bribe, the more your probability goes up for winning.
Uh,
Stealing.
Historically, that's been proven. Just saying.
I think like my answer here is not spicy. It's one word: aggregation. Um, that was a joke also, but basically, I think like we're past the phase of like Interop being a zero sum game. I think like the Interop that wins won't replace necessarily everything. There may be some like traditional dynamics, like teams joining forces, um, one protocol combining with another protocol to like come up with this like end inner op. I do agree with Prabal's point of view that not all inner op will exist actually, and part of me wants like this like one neutral in coordination layer, interop layer to like be adopted. I think in the app chain world, we're seeing similar dynamics. Basically, like what is the best way to build a execution environment on Ethereum? Um, it's like the space is kind of moving towards fewer players, which I think is great. It shows natural selection. I think even the fact that you bribe, you give grants, all these things are thanks to natural selection. And I think like Interop will probably move in that direction as well. The end, the ending, like the end vision, I'm not going to talk about, but basically, I think like key here is users won't be. I don't think that users will be like confused about what an interrupt they're using. The really good builders that are building applications like Polymarket will be selecting these things, and I think we don't have to worry too much about users in the medium to long term future. So that's kind of like a second layer of spice.
And how does like adding support for a new chain, like apart from providing them with a grant or bribe, of course. But how does adding a new support for a totally new chain looks like for ag layer? Like I feel like uh, socket might have a edge over that, but how does it look like for ag layer? If supposedly apart from the chains that you have for Polygon ecosystem and you need to add a new chain, we already have like 200 chains, and if you open L2 beat, there are 400 more launching in any time soon. So
Mhm.
how does that look like for ag layer?
Yeah, this is like something that our engineering team is working really very focused on. I would say I will say two things here. One is chain development kit is basically Polygon's old app chain, let's say legacy app chain stack. Um, Now it supports both the legacy Aragon version of chain development kit as well as OP version. And Aglair CDK is the easiest way to launch production grade chains with native interoperability, which is Aglair. So we're working with roll-up as a service providers like Conduit and Gateway, and they're doing all the heavy lifting, which is not super heavy lifting, to connect the CDK chains to the ag layer. So that's like one way, building an ag layer CDK chain from scratch, or you're an existing chain that wants to add ag layer support. That is a little bit more of a indirect way. We call this um, outpost. This is maybe too much information or too much detail, but basically running an instance of ag layer and doing the existing tokens mapping to the ag layer's shared bridge. We're working on both, bigger. We're working on these outpost integrations for bigger ecosystems like Base, as well as some app-specific chains. So those are like two ways. There's also a really interesting idea right now that we were brainstorming today that I won't get into, but it's kind of like sockets model. There could be I don't know if you know this VC, but there may be like a collaboration there too. But that's like the third way. I'll pause there. These are like three ways to connect to the ag layer.
We see how many chains does socket already supports, like more than 70, I guess.
No, believe it or not, I think I think you like there are a lot of chains, but the hot pathways are not that many, right? And sort of like change very rapidly. We've ultimately gone to a model where have you seen how Circle's USDC is sort of like expanding between networks? So what they do is they have like published this contract that you can like deploy on your network as you launch, and when Circle sort of reaches that network, it will sort of take over the token. But till then, someone else can run it, right? And when Circle comes, they can take over the USDC and make it native, right? So ultimately, we've landed on a similar model where anyone can plug themselves into Socket. It won't be part of the mesh or like the official mesh in some sense. But when Socket does officially expand, it can be part of official mesh. But that doesn't mean you will lack connectivity if like Socket does not support a network. So ultimately, we all want to get to a point where if you launch a chain, you can start bringing users on day one and then expand to something more secure or something that is more standardized across the space. So I think that's like roughly our model.
Trouble, you want to add something?
No, I think again, I think it's all about getting the integration points right for new chains. I mean, there's no common way to integrate it because there are different problems when it comes to different types of interrupt that are there. um, People want to avoid wrapped assets. If you do not have wrapped assets, then you cannot just arbitrarily deploy a message passing contract and get things done, because then you will have multiple versions of it. Then comes all the different frameworks like entity and such, which try to have yeah. So like how to unify some of the wrapped asset interfaces and such. But again, I think as Vaibhav is mentioning on our private chat that every asset is a wrapped asset, and that is sadly true.
Can you
So there is
expand
a
after you're done? Maybe that's an interesting subject.
Yeah, I think again, Vaibhav has been a very vocal, supporter of, or at least discussion maker of the wrapped asset class. And I think he has pretty strong opinions there. I would go with him to lead.
I mean, every asset is technically a wrapped asset. It's all about who is blessing that wrapped asset, right? So every like who is issuing that asset. Um, okay, we can be a little bit philosophical here, right? I don't think anyone will ban me for it, but really, like the USDC that most DeFi applications support on that network is the native USDC, right? And when Circle officially comes, it says, hey, we've deployed a new ERC20 contract, and this is the one we bless. Then a good amount of users will consider that wrapped asset as the canonical one. So what is canonical, like what is wrapped, what is not wrapped is sort of based on social consensus and not any technical details, is my point.
Yeah, I think.
So sorry. Then this just all comes to the same idea on, like, what is bribed and what is not bribed kind of situation, or what the social consensus want to push forward, right?
No,
um
I think I would term it differently. I mean, what Vaibhav said is absolutely correct, but it's also about the asset issuer, right? The blessing of the asset issuer. Now, I mean, taking talking about a USDC, USDT is can get a bit more problematic because it's about a USD backed stable coin and all that. But if you really think about it, it's about who is the issuing entity. I mean, right now RWA is the rage, right? And you will see a lot of tokenization of assets and such. At the end of the day, all that they care about, all the financial institutes care about, is who has the asset issuance controlling entity, and whoever they bless is the canonical asset. There is nothing wrapped. I mean, they can be 10 times wrapped across 5 different chains, but you don't care because the asset issuing entity is backing it up. In a stablecoin, like for example, that's the exact same thing, right? That USDC, there might be two versions of it on the same chain. Both of them might have the same value, so to say, because it is being backed by Circle either on this chain or on some other chain from where it has been wrapped to. But the liquidity is not the same, hence the demand supply game gets screwed up as soon as there is social consensus coming in and so on. But if you talk about theoretical values, they are all somewhat blessed by Circle plus
The
being the bridging risks that it takes.
the liquidity that like big stablecoin issuers provide is also like what makes their version of their token more legitimate version, right? Is it the right way to think about it? Like if USDC or Circle says, hey, support this version on this chain, they will also provide liquidity behind it to make it more of a viable option. Is this right? Or am I thinking about it in the wrong way?
I think
I mean,
it's
like,
right and wrong. Go ahead.
yeah, go. I think like these guys don't really like actually provide liquidity. They are more like asset issuers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think then the protocols that want to use it, or users that want to like swap from the old version to the new version, they sort of like provide liquidity for it, right? So I don't think like liquidity is like that big of a factor. But really, I think if you zoom out, what is really happening is chains are more like servers, and interop is where the network effects are at for a token. Like if you hear like USDT, like Paul from USDT and like Circle guys talk about this, for them, Tron is the same as Ethereum, right? They literally use like chains as servers for hosting their assets. Where the real power lies in is in like who is issuing that asset And in a lot of cases, that's the interop provider that's like issuing that asset. If there is a token that's native to a particular interop provider, that token can't exist in a canonical form till that interop protocol expands to a particular chain. So chains are increasingly becoming almost like containers or hosts of these assets, and assets are being issued by interop solutions. That's like roughly the shift that's like happening in the space. And that's also why we started pushing in this like chain abstraction direction, because if like these stable coins are literally chain abstracted, and these are one of the biggest applications of like crypto today.
Okay, I think a lot of hot takes there. I agree with most of it here, but just because we brought in chains and we're talking about interop solution, I want to ask you guys on what happens when, let's say, a certain chain does not want to integrate any kind of interop solution. Um, don't you think that these interop solution need to be permissionless for apps, chains, users, or anyone using it, or there is no way for them to be permissionless? Because I want to see a world where like I don't depend on a certain backend, let's say Aglair or Nexus, to be integrated with chain one and then wait for their integration. That kind of situation.
To be honest, like I will try to start here. If you ask any one of us here, every one of us will say it's permissionless. Anyone can come, and there is a way to get things plugged in without explicit permission from any one of our protocols, right? I think I'm probably speaking on others' behalf here, but they will probably agree. The problem is what when it gets to who the risk taker is. Like you will see that the problem is not with the protocol integration, but with the UI integration. The regulatory risk comes down to whoever is showing on the UI. And I think Oz didn't like what I said on his behalf
hot.
when he left.
I think he just got disconnected.
Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the protocol will support happily, but the UI may or may not be able to support, and that is not because of the protocol's limitation. It's because of regulatory purview which comes up sometimes. It can be regulatory. It can be just the amount of servers and amount of infra that you need to host to support it and so on. Like it all comes down to a multiple plethora of things that goes behind the scenes in order to connect one more chain. And hence it is every protocol is expandable, right? In the sense that a new chain can come in and get plugged in and work. But it's about the nitty-gritties and the infra, about who hosts it, about who controls it, what happens when it goes down, what happens if that goes kaput, is what kind of sometimes forces some of these decisions, not the protocol itself.
Okay, so I think then that is more on just the support and taking the responsibilities for anything that goes wrong, right?
And not only that, like if you think about a new roll-up, right? I will take an example and try to enumerate here. Like if you think about a general purpose normal roll-up, there are many types of roll-ups. As Vaibhav was putting it, there are servers, and I call roll-ups as verifiable servers. So there are many types of verifiable servers. But in a settled roll-up, which is settling to Ethereum, let's say, there is always a canonical bridge. So a roll-up in its default form already has a bridge, and this particular bridge can always be used. There is nothing stopping people to use that canonical bridge, right? So like the problems that we are talking about is how easy it becomes for that bridge to be integrated onto existing protocols, so that the user doesn't have to go to a new UI or a new piece of infrastructure to get things starting to work. That's probably what we are discussing here.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Understandable. A lot of it. Rishi, do you have something to ask?
Yeah, I would probably go back to one of the hot takes that has been around on CT, where everyone has been talking where Solana can be unanimously the layer one chain that doesn't need that kind of interop, whereas with so many L2, so many rollups, it has been all fragmented, and it took a while for Ethereum to now start focusing on with open intent framework and all of these projects coming along with that. I know that Socket and a lot of these other projects have been doing efforts and for a while now. But yeah, I mean, what's your hot take on this? Where Solana as a layer one is very proponent on that, and L2's fragmented, and you know haven't been very much optimized for interop so much.
I would go first here. Before Vaibhav can shill Socket, I would go out and say, like, I think they integrated Solana a few
Yeah,
days
2 years
back.
back, right?
Right? So I was so happy to see that, because it is so much needed, because we don't want to create these walled gardens anymore, right? That enough of, this is the Ethereum and L2 island, and this is Solana, and this is another big L1 ecosystems out there. We need to start acting as, one big giant ecosystem sooner or later. Um, but I still don't want to evade the question that you proposed, right? So is it like Solana can do it and do it better than all the Ethereum L2s, and Ethereum L2s are facing a problem? The first thing is, under the current amount of TPS load, Solana is able to survive and do it much, much better, right? So a single L1 where all things are there on the single chain, there is no need for all the fragmentation, all the interop XYZ. Is Solana doing a good job? I think they are doing an absolutely fantastic job, right? So there is no doubt about it that they are giving a more cohesive experience. But the assumption that we have to take is that the amount of transactions remain similar to what we are seeing right now. As more and more transactions come in and more activity comes in, no single chain will be able to sustain up to the load of a billion users, or 5 billion users or so. And at that kind of scale, we need the horizontal scalability, right? So we need ways to scale up as per the demand. And I think rollups provide that. Rollups provide a way to shard the load among multiple servers by extending Vaibhav's analogy, right? So you can think of every one of these rollups as servers. And as more demand comes in, the number of servers just scale up. And then when the demand goes out, the servers come down, right? So this is exactly the kind of vision what we have at Avail, and that's what we are building for. And in this kind of a world, interrupt is a native problem, and is going to be a solved problem. In that kind of a world, you will not notice which server you're interacting with. What chain abstraction, what we are saying today by Vaibhav, is basically how you interact with your Instagram server without knowing which server you're interacting with. You just care that it's loading up fast, it's being served all the content and so on. It might be served from a PDN cache in your city, but the actual data might be miles apart in a continent, two continents apart. So those kind of experiences are going to come in, and we are building for that kind of a world, not for a world where the amount of transactions remain the same.
I
That
think
sorry, just a kind of a counter take is that is believing that we will do a mass adoption, which is not, which I cannot see for a long time. I'm just kidding. Go on, VC.
I was just going to say, okay, that's a technical take and a valid one, right? But I think even if you like forget about like scaling and such, I think the fact is people will want to be sovereign. People will want to have a chain just because they can fuck with it, right? That's what Hyperliquid is. They took the normal model of a chain and like really tailor made it to their application, and that's what like mature applications in crypto will do, right? So it's not just about scaling; it's about sovereign and having more control as well. And just from that belief, I think Interop is sort of like needed, no matter if you're building something like Solana, if you're building something like a rollup centric roadmap, or if you're building like an app chain like Hyperliquid.
Yeah, I think like what I was gonna like say in the previous conversation kind of ties to VC's point. Like if a chain is not using an interop, I think there's like two scenarios where one is like they don't have a strong reason or business case to use blockchain tech, um, or they are an extremely successful end game base layer, where like everyone uses them. The second one probably not gonna happen because of the sovereign argument that VC made. Like I think all the institutions will want to have some sort of control. Um, not as much as Hyperledger type control, like dinosaur controls, but there will be like a fine line between being completely open and permissioned. So in that world, I think Interop is even gonna be more and more important. You launch your tokenized fund on your permissioned, semi-permissioned chain. You want it to be useful. For it to be useful, there will be thousands of builders. There are thousands of builders that are building, additional yield mechanisms around your tokenized fund. So you want your user to be able to take out the tokenized fund from your chain and go somewhere else. So in this is a simple use case, not a hallucinating type use case. These are happening. These types of use cases are happening even on Polygon POS. Uh, so I think in a world where more companies getting into the space, I think keeping that sovereign edge is going to be important, and that will make interoperability even more table stakes.
And just to point out, like even on Solana, successful applications are taking the sovereign route. So we are
Yeah.
already seeing those things happening, and it is going to go more. It's going to get even crazier. So completely agreed with the sovereign part of just seeing more and more app chains coming up.
I think
Are you
that
talking about Jupiter? Sorry, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I think a lot of people don't know that's happening.
yeah, I think even like Anisha is doing good work with that. And then people in Solana Eco are also like trying to push that. So that's imminently gonna happen for sure. We are close to the time. It's Naruto and Anisha back hold. Sorry, I read it out loud. I just love the team. Anyway, I was saying we are close to the time, so we have 1,000 active listeners. This was a very interesting conversation for me and everyone else here. Any closing remarks from all of you? Any kind of hot takes or whatever you want to say? Please, now is the time.
I'm gonna be selfish here in two ways. One, I'm gonna jump in first, and two, um, I'm personally like interested in speaking with businesses, institutions, um, developers building their own chain environments. And if you're exploring a new chain, want to connect to the ag layer, I would love to talk. We also have a very cool new product that we're rolling out to the market called Volt Bridge. It allows chains to generate yield from bridged assets. It's a very simple mechanism. Our great product managers and engineers are building it internally, and I think chain operators will find it very interesting because it's an additional revenue source for them. It's a tech that essentially creates win-win situations. So I'm personally pretty excited about that. If you're building a chain, reach out to me. Twitter, Wizard of Oz, X. So yeah, thank you for having me also.
Yeah, happy to go next. Thanks for having me. I think it's been interesting for us because we did start sort of like by solving interop. So for the first couple of years, Socket was focused on like cross chain and interop, and we realized that the real value for us is like sort of going a layer above, right? That's what like chain abstraction is about. And chain abstraction allows you to like plug into various proving systems from AgLayer to things like Avail Nexus. So if you want to build chain abstracted, reach out. I'm pretty online on X or on Telegram.
Yeah, I think I will go next. So not, I think everyone is shilling. So I will also shill a bit on Avail Nexus. So we have been, thinking about the roll-up fragmentation space quite a bit. Of course, others here have also taken a stab at it from their angle. For us, I think we want to provide the best in class kind of experiences to developers and users by providing them with choosable security models, and while still preserving fast and as fast as cheap as possible. So we are going to come up with our Nexus beta version very very soon. Would love to share it with you guys and get some feedback. Will definitely ping the people here personally to give it a try. uh, I think during each CC is the timeline. Let's see. But irrespective of what you use, I would say that you know if you have concerns and criticism about any of the existing experiences that you guys are facing, just getting stuff done cross chain, let us know, and any of us know, I would say, because we are all trying to solve for the end users and end developers. So any kind of feedback helps us improve our products.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think I'm actually very excited about Socket and Agler and Nexus. I have personally, seen a lot of Nexus development myself. So definitely, like that's going to be a great thing for everyone here. But again, thanks a lot, Os, Prabal, VC, for joining us. It was actually a great talk. I loved it. And Rishi, you have anything else?
Cool. No, I'm pretty excited to have you guys, and thanks for joining. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks
Thanks
a
for
Good
lot.
night,
having us,
guys.
man.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.